Going back to the problem we're trying to solve, we were asked to have a dialog box that should appear automatically when the file is open and should contain at least. So we're going to work on the open automatically. In Windows, unless we set in Excel 2007, unless we set the security to low, there is no way for this to happen. I'm going to still show you how it works. And that has to do with security. But once we set this, we set the security to mid-level and say run the macros, we should be able to see this dialog box, this one here, popping up at the beginning of the program. We will also, at the same time, we will decide where do we want to start actually the user, and I suggest that we start the user at the drawing. Okay, so they see what is the left, and then we will have on the drawing the dialog box which will explain to the user what needs to be done. For that to happen, we will have to write a special type of macro, and there's a special name, it's a reserved name, it's called auto open. I refer to it in the Visual Basic notes, and that is over here at the beginning. This is the auto open, and you'll see how it works. You'll see that it starts with auto open, and then it says first select a sheet. Well, that is the same command as we have in our module. This is the select a sheet. This is where we tell to Visual Basic what sheet do we want the user to go. We will not do that today because while we are still doing the development, that's going to be in our way. What we want is to have this macro that brings up the dialog box automatically for us. So the second line of it is going to be the name of the dialog box, period, and then or dot, the way it's said in computer language, dot show, which means show me the dialog box. That's all it is. You read it backwards and it gives you exactly what you need. So we will start actually from Excel by going to developer, record new macro, and this is going to be called auto with capital A underscore capital O open. And we're going to use Control M like menu for it. Okay. And the reason we're starting it from here is for nothing else but to add this shortcut key that makes our life easier. We say OK, and we can stop recording right away. We have just created an empty shell for this macro. We can now go back to Visual Basic. It was put, the macro was put in module number 2. That is not unexpected. Every time we said that every time you are opening the file again, all the macros go in a new module. As we said, we can move it to module number 1 if you want. And I'm going to do that. Control X, make sure you don't copy, you actually move. So Control X cuts, and I'm going to put it right at the beginning of my module 1. It doesn't matter where it is alphabetically. Visual Basic doesn't really care. So now I'm ready to insert the two commands that I need. One is to go to the drawing sheet, and I just copy and paste that command. I don't want this command though to be active. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a quote mark in front of it, which means now it is completely ignored, and I'm going to put a note to self, disable and enable. Next command before submitting project. And the way I do this so that I can see them well is I will put stars, everything with commas. Excuse me, with quote mark, which means they are ignored by Visual Basic. and then before submitting, we will just take these out, the comments. We will take the quote mark out, and the moment I take the quote mark out, that actually becomes, from a remark, it becomes a command. And we said that the command we're talking about starts with a tab, right? It's the name of the dialog box. Now, I can either come here and take the name of the dialog box, that's one way, or I can do control space and user form will bring up the user form. Notice that there are two, again, this is a new image that we have. The user form, it's a type of object that we haven't seen before. We have seen the properties, we have seen the little flying boxes, which we said are different properties, and then these are further underlying properties. So user form avw dot, you type s age and show will show up, and that's all it is to it. Let's see what happens. Now I don't even need to have the run the macro anymore, or run the dialog box anymore. If I'm on the input-output sheet or any other sheet and I do Control M, you would expect it to run. However, this is another little bug that Visual Basic for Application has in Excel 2007. Since we moved the auto open from one module to another, Visual Basic lost track of what is the shortcut key. So I will need to go back to macros, auto open, options, and put back the shortcut key to it. And now when I do Control M, it shows up. As I said last time, the fact that it's written here Control M has no bearing on what the subroutine actually does. So Control M, now I have all my buttons working, up and down, and I can take it away and do the interaction with it. Next time we're going to work on the outputs as well as adding the controls, the buttons on the user form. Right now we're ready to save. File, save as. This time this is going to be version number 4 on the desktop, and I want you to see what happens with the auto open. So I'm going to close Excel. When I did that, Excel Visual Basic went to it as well. You can save it from the Visual Basic as well. I prefer to save it from Excel so I know what I have just saved. And this is version 4. When I open it, it will show up with the button saying you have macros there. Do you want to enable them? This is the part that we didn't take the risk of going to developer and saying don't ask. And then we say enable the content, and so when I say OK, the first thing that will happen is that this macro that is called auto open will run. There's a way actually to add viruses to this, and then the way people add viruses is exactly this. They put the macro in, they do one that is called auto open, and then they take over whatever happens in the background. This is how viruses are created. You can then hide them from the user so the user doesn't even know that in the background a lot of things are happening. One more thing before we close for today, and that is you notice that when we go to developer and we go to record macro, there is a place that we didn't talk about, and that is where the macro goes. Right now we stored it in this workbook. There's a possibility to create a personal macro workbook or put it in the new workbook. Depending on what you want to do with the macro, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but you can have your own personal set of macros which you open, and then they will transfer to other files as well. Of course, particular names such as we gave now have to be found in the sheet that you are working with. So that takes a little more knowledge that we have right now. And we can put it in a new workbook. Excel has an area where they would put the add-ins and templates so that every worksheet that you open new, would have those particular macros that can be done in Word as well. And in PowerPoint, for a matter of fact, except that, as I said, PowerPoint doesn't have the macro recorder. Again, you should have 6 DOM labels and 5 DOM labels here, nothing on the outputs, and all these buttons should work for next time, as well as the error correction should be ready. This being said, we have come to the conclusion of this lecture. We will see you next time.